the Gordian knot, the Promethean fire, and the fountain of youth. All of these have been thought up from the Stone Ages, and shortly thereafterwards, things that would empower the world. Nature is never at a standstill, but does it have a ground state? All of this and more coming up right now. A Gordian knot is something that was put together so fantastically that it held a chariot dedicated to Jupiter, fastened with a beam and yoke, tied off, of course, with a Gordian knot. This is something that couldn't be cut because it was so complex with how it was knotted. One thing with knots is that they all have a twist, and with an antenna, it's nothing short of how well they're bent. Bent at odds because they're picked up with feed. Feed, of course, is an electric outburst that would be fed into the antenna. So with the bend and the feed together gives a twist comparison to a Gordian knot. However, the Gordian knot cannot be the same as all the antennas on planet Earth together, because there's nothing that could not take out all the antennas to the point of a cyber grid crashing. A cyber grid crashing would be all the antennas going haywire, because what had been designed would have then picked up too much feed. So it would be as a knot that was tied too tight, or the antennas that got shorted because they didn't have a circuit breaker to restart. No one controls the electric of the planetary electricity because it's natural, but how much of it is generated is a different status entirely. This of which we can see as Promethean fire and a fountain of youth. I don't know what a Promethean fire is, but it seems real important. The fountain of youth, of course, is something attributed to how stuff is weathered. Both of these together as a comparison within atoms, because their Brownian motion, when all together, can imitate fluid-like dynamics, even though if the atoms aren't as a fluid, they can have a Brownian motion and be as one. It's just like the same thing when you see a whole bunch of people at a distance. They move almost like an entire wave would. This is a representation of Brownian motion. And then, of course, the photoelectric effect. And the more that something has got a greater energy field, the more information is easier to read in. And when this is of occurrence, if you know anything about special effects, it would be brought to the forefront and made a lot easier, any anomalies within that vicinity. And so when it comes to getting what graphic is, people don't like things that are morbid if they're in the center of it. And so the more that things are clear and concise, you can have the precision of what would succumb to a comorbidity without encapsulating it, but using it almost as what snake venom has, an anti-venom or an ailment for things that could be dangerous, is just one way of looking at why someone would put a Forest Oak engine with rockets in its center. Same reason why CERN would go after a particle zoo by connecting the cosmos from what already happened into whatever they want to accelerate. The thought of this double helix showing up left and right in almost everything that's alive would be a representation of a yoke. Now, how this yoke is sewn into the Gordian knot is a relic of how tightly that beam is in between it and the chariot. It would be from planet Earth to Jupiter where that chariot was dedicated, which gives a certain length, that of which would represent a photoelectric effect amount, just as much as antennas need a perfect height for great feeds. Giving a secret, in the yoking of coding, this logic gate has a definite value when it's put all the way to Jupiter, where no one can touch it